Good evening, Carmel families. We are delighted that you have joined us this evening for our first Digital Safety and Mental Health Parent Night. I am Jen Penix, Executive Director of the Carmel Education Foundation. The foundation is committed to lifelong learning for not only our students, but for our educators and our families. We are especially proud to partner with Carmel Place Schools to present tonight's program, Raising Strong Minds in a Digital World. As a parent of 3 Carmel graduates, I know firsthand how challenging it is to navigate the digital world that is embedded in the lives of our children. I would suspect that you are here tonight as, collectively, our children spend an enormous amount of time online. There is certainly much to learn and discover, and there is plenty of positive content there. But as parents and community members, we also know that real harm can happen to kids online. This program is just one way we are working to come together to protect our children from the dangers they may encounter there. Tonight, you'll hear from several experts who are addressing digital safety concerns from a variety of perspectives. To get our evening started, I'd like to introduce Dr. Michael Beresford, Superintendent of Carmel Place Schools, who will share his own opening remarks.
Hey, can we thank the Carmel Education Foundation? They do so much for us. We just had scholarship night last night, and then they're sponsoring us this evening. So let's give them 3 claps and a whoosh. And if you don't know what 3 claps and a whoosh is, we're going to clap our hands 3 times together. We're going to go like this, and then we're going to go whoosh. So if we do it all together at the same time, this is for you, Jen, and your team. Ready? Here we go. Thank you very much. And when you get, to my age and stuff, this is like really fun. But I really do appreciate all you guys do. Tonight's a really good example of how collaboration and collaboration together can make us all do better, and that together we really are better. Internally at Carmel Place Schools and externally, tonight's team, which is amazing Kate Masterson, who you'll hear from in a minute, and I really, on my phone, when I push the button, it says Amazing Kate. That's who I call her. And so she's all things digital safety at Carmel Place Schools. Brooke Lawson, our mental health coordinators, fantastic professional and colleague. And then Ramona Rice is one of our assistant directors in curriculum. And then our school resource team is just not better than just an amazing group, and I don't know anybody better. And SRO Zimmerman was part of that team, and they all got together to collaborate to get some good hardcore information, and hopefully we'll get, then we have a speaker. It's really going to be a good night to get some conversations started. The importance of tackling mental health has been a priority since my first year 6 years ago, and along with that, playing into that is technology, and how do we piece this together? And the only way we're going to be able to support our kids to the highest level and making sure that they're safe and that they're learning at the highest level possible is to work together. And it's that parent and school partnership. And also you add the community to that. And when we all work together for our kids, that's when the magic happens. So thank you for being here. Being here, showing up is the first step in being a hero. And you guys showed up tonight. And hopefully we can get this information out to folks, and we can work together to make sure that our kids are covered, and that we keep them safe, and we get them in the highest level of the educational environment, and also just grow up as good people. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to the one and only amazing Kate Masterson. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Beresford. That is a hard introduction to follow, but I will do my best. So again, my name is Kate Masterson. I'm the Assistant Director of Digital Security and Privacy for Carmel Place Schools, which is a new role that we created a couple of years ago. And my goal tonight is to share with you some of the things we're doing as a district for our district systems to help protect kids, and then to share back the data that you so generously shared with us in helping to prepare for tonight. So to get started, we have a great school board that is super supportive of our work. And they actually put in our strategic plan that we were going to work towards something called the Trusted Learning Environment Seal. And that is from an organization called COSIN, and that's the Consortium for School Networking. And it is the only framework that addresses data privacy for the K-12 environment. And so this particular, next slide please. This particular seal covers 5 domains and 25 practices, everything from the highest levels of leadership all the way down to the classroom level. And we are very pleased to announce that back in October, next slide, we were privileged to be granted the seal. It's a 2-year program. We are one of about 26 districts in the country that have received this honor. And so we are very proud of that work. We recognize that our work is ongoing, and we are really just getting started. It will never be over, which is job security for me, I guess. And then as a part of that work, we created a resource that is on our website. So there's a QR code that will take you there if you want to jot down that website. If you go to www.ccs-k12 /digital safety, that's a place where we house all kinds of information about the things we do internally in the district. And then we also have resources for things that you can do at home to help protect your home network, strategies that you can implement with your families to help keep our kids safe. We're really proud of the work that we've done there and hope that you check it out. And we'll be sharing our resources from this evening on that website probably early next week. So now, being good data stewards, I want to take you through the data that we collected in that survey that many of you so graciously filled out. I don't think any of this data is going to be particularly surprising. It certainly wasn't to us as we examined it, and it just really reiterated the importance of the work that we're doing. So if you look across the grade level spectrum, you'll see that, it's not surprising that the most respondents are in that sort of sweet spot, that end of elementary, middle school age range. We know that those are the ages that a lot of students are getting their first technology, and so the concern about keeping them safe is great. Not that parents of other grade levels don't have those same concerns, but that was not super surprising to us. The next question we asked had to do with when a student got their first cell phone. Now, we didn't specify smartphone in this survey, and that was sort of by design. We kept these questions very broad. And you can see, again, that upper elementary into middle school is where students are getting their first cell phone. Again, not super surprising data. That number down in the bottom in the green is my student doesn't have a cell phone. And so, of course, we got respondents from all grade levels, so we wouldn't expect our youngest learners to have their cell phones yet. And then the numbers obviously get much smaller as students get older. So, not surprising data, but it is good to see it represented there. This number shows that we are, definitely concerned about the amount of time our kids are spending on technology. I love that number that's in blue, the 744, who think that, their students have a pretty healthy use of technology recreationally. Obviously, there's great benefits. Technology is fun. I have a Switch at home. I like to play video games, but I need to recognize that that can't be all I do with my recreational time. But then obviously there is a great concern that our kids are spending too much time online as well. And so those numbers are pretty telling of why we're here today. And then we asked you to comment on a couple of statements. And we were really, really pleased with the results that so many parents are having conversations with their kids regularly about technology. That is so, so important to have those conversations often. We have them in the classroom with your kids often as well. And for you to reiterate that behavior at home is incredibly encouraging. The numbers start to creep up a little bit as we look at the, I'm confident that I know what my students are doing on their technology. That disagree number starts to creep up just a little bit, which as someone who works in the technology department at Carmel Clay Schools, we do know that children are very clever and they talk to their friends and they find ways to bypass the restrictions and safety measures that we put in place. The numbers on, I find it easy to set boundaries and expectations, I think are very telling. We know that this work is hard. Technology is fun, and it is enticing. And I find myself gravitating to my tiny pocket computer and pulling it out of my pocket, not really knowing why I'm looking at it. And I know your kids are experiencing that as well. And so we see the struggle there. The green bar in the next one is also incredibly informative. So social media can negatively impact children's mental health. Not that it does, ultimately 100%, but it certainly can. And that's one of the reasons we're here tonight to talk about ways that we can mitigate those effects. And then finally, we're so glad that you feel comfortable talking with other parents, because we really believe the community conversation is what is going to move us in the right direction for keeping our kids safe. And then one of the final questions we asked you to tell us what you wanted to know more about, and that's really why we're here. So you can see that bar that says we are interested in protecting our students from digital dangers is real high. And so we as a team got together and said, okay, how can we address some of those concerns? And that is why we're gathered here tonight and why we have our list of speakers. So it is with great pleasure that I'm going to invite up our partners at Carmel Clay Schools, our Carmel Police Department and our Carmel Student Resource Officers. And they're gonna come and share some information about that highest bar, those digital dangers, because in order to protect our kids, we have to know what's out there. We have to know what we're protecting them from. And so if I could have Officer Greg Zimmerman and Detective Greg Loveall come on down, they are going to share with you about cyber safety.
How are y'all tonight? Got my handy dandy clicker. All right, let's see if this starts working for me yet. Oh, it showed my picture. Oh, okay, I don't want to spoil the surprise. It's me. So my name is Greg Zimmerman. I'm a school resource officer here for the Carmel Police Department, but I have the pleasure of working at Carmel Clay Schools every single day. And I gotta get on your level for a minute. I gotta say thank you to all of you. Thank you for being here tonight. When a community comes together and we collaborate and we communicate, you can't tell me that this isn't gonna positively impact our future generations for years to come. Nights like tonight, when you guys are investing your time into our children, this is what we call success. This is how our children build that firm foundation so that way they can be successful. So thank you so much for being here. Now I will tell you today, the other Greg, actually, you wanna know something funny? Both of our names are Greg. They were like, hey, we need people to speak tonight. Here's the one prerequisite. Your name's gotta be Greg. Check. So today, the other Greg stopped by my school, Towne, Meadow. We have Towne, Meadow fans in here? Okay. He stopped by and we walked through the cafeteria, and the best fourth grader raised her hand as we walked by, and she asked the other Greg, are you his dad?
So I'm not his dad. I said, why do you think that? That will do it. She said, you just have a lot of gray hair. So we are friends, but I'm not his father. Again, my name is Greg as well. I'm a detective with Carmel Police Department. I'm more of a podium guy, so I'll probably stand here. But I've been with Carmel for about 16 years, and I'm currently assigned to a task force, basically, that focuses on internet crime against children. So we're out there trying to locate individuals that are exploiting children, that are either producing, disseminating, trying to trade or share child sex abuse material, also known as child pornography. So that's kind of my main job, my main task force. Tonight, we are going to talk about a couple of serious topics, but within our job, we try to find humor as well, because of just the things we have to do and things we see. So before we start, we'll show you a quick video, and it's supposed to be humor involved in it. As parents, I think you guys will understand, but the meaning behind it was, as important as it is to talk about sex education with your kids and understanding consent and those kind of things, it's also important you sit down and educate your children about consent when it comes to the internet. So this is a video about consent, and we'll get more into what we're going to talk about tonight.
If you're still struggling with consent, just imagine instead of initiating sex, you're making them a cup of tea. You say, hey, would you like a cup of tea? And they go, oh my God, I would love a cup of tea, thank you. Then you know they want a cup of tea. If you say, hey, would you like a cup of tea? And they're like, I'm not really sure. then you can make them a cup of tea, or not, but be aware they might not drink it. And if they don't drink it, then, and this is the important part, don't make them drink it. Just because you made it doesn't mean you are entitled to watch them drink it. And if they say no thank you, then don't make them tea at all. Just don't make them tea. Don't make them drink tea. Don't get annoyed at them for not wanting tea. They just don't want tea, okay? They might say, yes, please, that's kind of you. And then when the tea arrives, they actually don't want the tea at all. Sure, that's kind of annoying as you've gone all the effort of making the tea, but they remain under no obligation to drink the tea. They did want tea, now they don't. Some people change their mind in the time that it takes to boil the kettle, brew the tea, and add the milk. And it's okay for people to change their mind. And you are still not entitled to watch them drink it. And if they're unconscious, don't make them tea. Unconscious people don't want tea. And they can't answer the question, do you want tea? Because they're unconscious. Okay, maybe they were conscious when you asked them if they wanted tea. And they said yes. But in the time it took you to boil the kettle, brew the tea, and add the milk, they are now unconscious. You should just put the tea down. Make sure the unconscious person is safe. And this is the important part again. Don't make them drink the tea. They said yes then, sure, but unconscious people don't want tea. If someone said yes to tea, started drinking it, and then passed out before they finished it, don't keep on pouring it down their throat. Take the tea away. Make sure they're safe, because unconscious people don't want tea. Trust me on this. If someone said yes to tea around your house last Saturday, that doesn't mean they want you to make them tea all the time. They don't want you to come around to their place unexpectedly and make them tea and force them to drink it going, but you wanted tea last week. Or to wake up to find you pouring tea down their throat going, but you wanted tea last night. But if you can understand how completely ludicrous it is to force people to have tea when they don't want tea, and you're able to understand when people don't want tea, then how hard is it to understand it when it comes to sex? Whether it's tea or sex, consent is everything. And on that note, I'm going to go make myself a cup of tea.
So anyways, we're going to talk about some serious topics tonight, but just again, being in law enforcement, we're seeing a lot of these trends lately with social media being a big problem with online predators and children that are making not very wise decisions and potentially being lured into things that they're not supposed to be doing. So tonight we'll talk about that a little more. And Greg, if you want to go ahead.
So a couple weeks ago, Towne Meadow hosted an event after school. Had a great turnout, lots of parents, lots of kids. And one of my favorite parts about that is Towne Meadow alumni usually come to after school events. And so there were some Creeksiders that stopped by Towne Meadow that evening, and they came up to me, Officer Zimmerman, how are you? Creekside's amazing, we love the lunch. And it was good communication, it's fun to see them. And I said, hey, I've got a couple questions for you. Assuming, because it's all the phones in our hands, assuming you have Snapchat, right? And he giggled, he says, yeah. And I said, being completely honest, I won't judge you, I won't be mad, I just am curious. Do you have people added on Snapchat who you have truly, genuinely never met before? Because I know on Snapchat there's the quick add feature where you can just start adding people, where it says people you may know, and there's a plus sign that says add. They all kind of looked at each other, and they're like, yeah. And I'm like, a lot of people? And they're like, yeah. It's just so easy. It's so easy to just go through and add all these strangers. And I'm like, what's the difference between that and going to the grocery store and all of a sudden just sparking up a conversation with people? You would do that, right? No, that's in person. That's weird. This is online. They don't know who I am. They don't know anything. But you're still sending snaps back and forth, right? Yeah. You can only imagine that their location is turned on Snap Maps too, right? So now they get to know what school they go to, where they live, what their routines are. So that was just my wake-up call. And after that interaction with those students, it really just left me with an uneasy feeling about that. Teens today have access to so much in the palm of their hands. So I think we're in the year 2024. We can't really do much without a disclaimer. So I have two disclaimers for you. First one is we have maybe 100 parents here tonight. Thank you all for being here. But I also know we have opposite ends of the spectrum when it comes to social media. I'm almost willing to bet at least one set of parents in this room, they say absolutely zero social media is under my roof. Not happening, no way, too much going on, I don't want to have to monitor that as well. Go you. I guarantee on the opposite end of the spectrum, we have parents that are maybe social media influencers. Maybe your children are social media influencers or in the process of becoming one. So you have to understand that tonight we have a spectrum of an audience, and I want you to know that we respect all of you. No matter what your viewpoints are on social media and internet safety, we know that you're here tonight because you genuinely care about the safety of your children. And that is on you to know what is best for your children. So that's disclaimer number one. There is no judging of however you handle social media in your household. We still love you. Disclaimer number two is we're going to talk about some websites, we're going to talk about some platforms, some businesses, maybe some apps. We are not affiliated with them in any way whatsoever. We are not advertising or sponsoring from anybody. And on the handouts that you have a lot of websites, a lot of great resources. We are not getting a penny from any of them, and I don't even know if any of them actually know that we're advertising their sources tonight. So, if you're like me, you're a numbers person. So I thought it'd be pretty neat to talk about the relevance of tonight with some current stats. So in 2023, in Hamilton County, where most of us live, police officers throughout the year arrested 16 predators linked to child exploitation and sextortion, just in our county alone. Just outside of our county, there was 13 additional arrests. With those arrests, just in 2023, 55 victims were identified from child sextortion or child exploitation. So now if we go into the realm of internet and social media, I found on a credible website that 97% of teens say they're using internet daily. 46% of teens say they use the internet almost constantly. 95% of teens are on YouTube. 67% of teens are on TikTok. 62% Instagram. 59% Snapchat. This is a little concerning. 16% of teens admit they are on TikTok constantly. Now, I don't know if you've been to any school events lately, but usually at the middle school and high school levels, you'll see them out doing their TikTok dances, and then they run back to their phone and click the pause, check it, and redo it again. I believe these stats. One thing I do think is kind of funny, though. Teens and Facebook. Over the last 10 years, there's been a decline in teens on Facebook by about 40%. So what's that tell us? We're old. So prior to giving this presentation tonight, I asked SROs, we're very fortunate here at Carmel Clay Schools. We have a minimum of one SRO in every building. High school has 4, and we have three SRO supervisors. I asked them, I said, what are you all seeing? I need to give some good content to this presentation tonight. High school SROs, how often a week are you investigating social media related content? They laughed. They said, all day, every day. And if it's not an SRO looking into what sex or snap or video was created or whatever was shared the previous night, it's one of their social workers. It is all day, every day. Middle school, still very prevalent because a lot of teenagers are getting their phones once they get to middle school. Elementary school, not near as prevalent. I'll tell you, the past 2 years, I was averaging maybe a few cases throughout the whole school year. At the beginning of this school year, I decided I was going to do a presentation for my 5th graders, and I talked to them about what a subpoena is. And I told them that just because you take a snap and you set the timer for 5 seconds and you send it to somebody, doesn't mean it's gone. Snapchat saved that on their servers, and I can submit a subpoena and see everything you've sent and received. So this year, it's been a good year. I think I got that one really. Okay. So it's so interesting, but that is also one of the powers of being an SRO in a school is that we have the power to get in the classroom and educate them on what else is out there, what police have the ability to do to let them know that they need to be safe. Part of our training as being an SRO is really learning about the teen brain. Now, it's pretty obvious here that I'm not a doctor, but the training that we received is pretty phenomenal, and one thing that's really stuck with me is, on average, your brain is fully developed between the age of 25 and 30. None of our high school students or middle school students or elementary school students are between the ages of 25 and 30. So what does that tell you? Their brain is not fully developed. There's a thing in the front of the brain called the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is commonly associated with decision making, the ability to think about long-term consequences, what's going to happen to me in the future, and why. So you're telling me that the teen brain isn't fully developed, and the most important part about the brain of decision making and thinking about long-term consequences is the last thing to develop when you're between the ages of 25 and 30, yet we're giving children handheld devices that have the ability to impact the rest of their lives today. This is where parents, it is so crucial for you to have that role model and that impact on them now, to let them know that their decisions and what they're posting today can impact the rest of their lives. We'll also have to remember this throughout this presentation. We're going to talk about some cases of child exploitation. You're going to think, why would the child do that? Just remember the prefrontal cortex. It's not fully developed. They might not be even able to tell you why. Have you ever asked your child after they did something, why did you do that? And they're like, I don't know. That's the truth. They don't know. That's the lack of the prefrontal cortex being able to kick in and tell them. So before we go in and tell you some stories, I really hope we don't scare you, but before we dive into that, we want you to know that you have resources available to you. Hopefully you picked up the handouts when you walked in. So here's Detective Loveall, your resources.
All right, guys, if you do have the handout, I'm not going to read it verbatim, just you will pull it out and check it out. But obviously some things we talk about today, we don't want to scare you. We want to know that there are resources available out there for you as parents, and hopefully you can educate your kids with these resources. There's an acronym I like to use, and this comes from the actual ICAC. Have you guys ever heard of ICAC? Because you might not heard of ICAC before. So ICAC Task Force is, that's a public website you can go to, and really what it is, Internet Crime Against Children is what that stands for. So they focus all on victim rescue and things like that, trying to identify victims out there and getting them pulled down off the internet if their pictures are floating around and things like that. So some of these resources that we handed you tonight are from that website. So what I like to just talk about shortly is just this SMART acronym. When you guys are dealing with your children and helping them with setting up devices or setting up applications on their phone, I think it's very smart to sit down and just have an overall knowledge of what they're putting on the phone. Setting up the device really empowers you as parents to create a safe and healthy digital environment for your kids. And not only setting up, but then monitoring what they're actually doing on the phones. Depending on their ages, I know you might, if they're younger, you want to see everything they're doing. As they get a little older, you're probably loosening up the amount of strictness that you decided to do with them. But what I would recommend with the monitoring side with your children is just basically, it's not about spying on them, but it's more to just strike a crucial balance between you want to protect them from potential harm and then fostering their digital independence. And there's so many applications out there that you're not going to be able to understand all of them. But what you can do is educate yourself on the applications that they do have on their phones or that you're allowing them to have, and educate yourself fully on what those applications are capable of. And quite frankly, what we're seeing in law enforcement is any application out there, from the Snapchats to the Instagram to the WhatsApps, everything, there's always people that are on there trying to exploit children, just being frank with you. The applications are meant to be good, but there are people that are trying to find ways to make them an advantage for an online predator. Some of the monitoring tools I recommend for you guys, if you don't know much about it, there's several things out there. Again, you can Google like top monitoring tools for parents on social media, and there's a slew of different things out there, but Bark is a good option that you can use. It's kind of a monitoring device that you're able to see from your device what's going on with your child's device at the same time. That also allows you to be able to approve things, screen time, if you want to shut the phones off at a certain time of day, things like that. There's Operation Light Shine, Family Keeper, InSpy, Parental ER, there's several. Enriching digital environment that fosters safety and security, trust and communication. And obviously, if you're going to monitor, approve, you want to be able to potentially restrict certain applications as well. And that's going to be up to you as a parent to decide, hey, you know, they've got this app, they've made a bad decision, I'm probably going to restrict it now. Or if you know, find one and research it and it seems like there's a lot of negative reviews or whatever, it may not be worth letting them have it. And it's basically just creating that safe and age-appropriate online environment where your children can explore and they can learn while being protected from the harm that's out there. And then lastly, talk. You talk to your children about sex education and other things in life. Think of online social media, just talking with them as an investment in their future. Technology and online trends, they're evolving rapidly. We see it every day, all the new things coming out. And it's really impossible for you as parents to know everything. But having ongoing conversations with them, and they'll probably educate you on all the applications that they have, but also it allows you to stay updated on the latest trends and the apps and challenges your kids might face. Again, several resources on that paperwork I encourage you to look at and take a look at the websites when you have time. So what's the worst that can happen? Is kind of a question we were asked tonight. And that leads me into talking about a couple common trends that we're seeing in law enforcement today. On the detective side, especially for me, really what we're seeing is the whole sexting. I'm sure you're all familiar with what sexting is, and we're seeing that leading to sextortion. And also we're seeing the luring of children for photos and or videos of sex acts, or luring to the point where actually having an in-person encounter with the child. So obviously sexting is, we know that's sending any sort of inappropriate text or video or image of yourself as a child. It's illegal to do that. And what was kind of alarming to me is that rate there it's almost 1 in 5 teens have sent a sex message of some sort. So sextortion, once the sexting begins, obviously you're going to have the risks that come with that, and obviously kids can be worried about having trouble at school, being bullied, obviously legal trouble, and then the sextortion aspect of things. Does anybody not know what sextortion is? So talk briefly about it. I'm gonna not read the full definition. There's not really a criminal code for that, sextortion. We just use that term because it's became kind of like a blackmail concept within the social media realm. And what it really is basically, it's blackmailing your children to do things that they don't want to do. And the main things I'm seeing and the law enforcement is seeing when it comes to sexting is where your child will send a nude and or some sort of video of engaging in sexual activity via social media. And when they do that, it could be completely innocent at first, or two people that are dating or whatever you want to call it, and they're sending it back and forth, and then it turns into one of 3 things generally. The person that wants to sextort them will say, if you don't continue sending me these things, I'm going to send these images and or videos to your family, and then that brings obviously the guilt and shame and things that we see that kids deal with. Or they say, if you don't continue to do this, I'm going to if you don't pay me a certain amount of money, so they'll send a nude and then they'll want to start requesting money from the kids. So if you don't send me X amount of money, then I'm going to send it to your family or friends. And then one other thing I'm actually seeing is now where kids will start to send and then they willingly do it because the person on the other end begins to take advantage of them and say, if you do continue to send me these, I'll send you money, or I'll send you money, or so you can buy drugs, alcohol, nicotine, or online gaming benefits. So it's becoming one of those things where quite honestly, some students are so affected by this that you see that it's kind of an alarming stat at the bottom there where just in October of 2021, people have committed suicide. There were several suicides over this because kids become so ashamed about what they did and they're afraid to tell their parents, and they're afraid to go to the police because they don't want to get in trouble. and they just get so so much shame and guilt happens from the person that's extorting him that it leads to, unfortunately, suicide, which I think is the worst thing that can happen. So what happens if your child becomes a victim of this? What do you guys think you should do? Well, obviously those resources are there. As law enforcement officers, we obviously, if your child comes to you and they say, hey, look, I've been talking to this person, I don't want to send any more news and making me continue to do it, immediately make sure you report it right away. Obviously, don't pay them any more money if they're doing that. You want to block them, and then you want to try to download your child's content from whatever device they're using. And most of these platforms have a site you can go to where you can actually download the content from your child's platform that they're using. And then obviously, save any communication you can as evidence for the police. That way we can try to track down and figure out what we can do for your child. One other tactic we're seeing, if it's not this extortion side of things, is the luring side of things. I'm not gonna, if you guys want to read the slide while I'm talking about it, I want to share just a quick case that we just had that involves luring, just to show you how serious this is. We had a case, we just arrested somebody in February of this year, where he was a 22-year-old male, and what he was doing was posing as a 16-year-old on a social media application called Wiz. Wiz is just one of many social platforms out there just communicating and meeting people. So what he was doing was meeting younger girls on there. He would lure 12-year-old girls and other minor age girls to the point where he would start the conversation on Wiz, and then he moved them over to getting their Snapchats and their Instagrams and continued direct messaging through there. And he was able to actually converse with a 12-year-old and befriended her, lured her, continued to talk to her to the point where she eventually provided her home address, where he then drove to her house, and actually she snuck out, met him in the car. They had sexual acts happening within his car. She's 12, he's 22, and then he left. Imagine if he didn't leave, how much worse that could have been. And fortunately for us, we were able to track him down. He is now looking at federal charges and should be in prison for the rest of his life. So that's one example of many that we're seeing, and I just wanted to share that with you guys. I think it's important just to truly make sure you are talking with your kids about what they're doing online. Just know what they're doing on their phones. You know, if you have to make an agreement that you want to see this device every night, just to keep accountability, whatever you need to do to just keep them safe, I encourage you guys to do that. And we have several other things we could talk about, but with lack of time, so.
So, this photo looks pretty real, right? Just a bunch of kids on the phone at the park, enjoying the beautiful day. It's pretty neat. I typed into an AI platform. I said, generate me a photo of children on their phones. And this was completely AI generated. And I was thinking, wow, that looks so real. It fooled me. And then this is where I kind of make the symbolism to our children. Because they're adding strangers on Snapchat or Wiz or Instagram or whatever, and they start communicating with them. And it feels so real. They feel like these people actually care about them. Now, I think sometimes when we think about child exploitation, we think, oh, the big, the bad, like that was so obvious. But these predators are good. They go in, they make these children feel so loved, so welcome, and as if the relationship is so real. And so I just thought that was jaw-dropping when I asked AI to create this photo today. And then I'm like, wow, that's similar to what children are going through. So to share, how else does child exploitation occur? Well, 40% of the cases, as teens would call, they slide into the DMs. And so DM stands for direct message. And 40% of the time, our victims, it all starts with that direct message. Hey, how are you? How was your day? Tell me more about you. Just that acknowledgement, that caring about them. 37% of children are exploited via chat rooms. There used to be a website called Omegle. It was very popular. I actually talked to my 5th graders about Omegle, and at the very beginning I said, raise your hand if you know what Omegle is. About 90% of them raised their hand. And it was very concerning to me. Since that chat site has been shut down because of all the child exploitation that happened through that, but now there's just other websites that are up and running. It's pretty scary. 21% of child exploitation comes from gaming platforms. And what I think about this is maybe some children don't necessarily have friends at school. Maybe they're not enjoying their clubs. Maybe things aren't going well for them in person, but when they can get into that virtual world, when they can go home and get on their PC, their Xbox, their PlayStation, but man, they have friends on there they're gaming with every day and they're really enjoying it. I get that. That's cool. I've played Call of Duty. I've got some games that I like, but it's very easy for that world to all of a sudden consume most of your time and how you're thinking. And so it's just so interesting to know that 21% of child exploitation comes from gaming. These people are connecting with them. They're playing games and actually making them feel loved. Majority of our victims are between the ages of 13 and 15 years old. Think about how young our brain is at that age. How easy it is to persuade a 13 to 15-year-old. Because our brains don't have that prefrontal cortex to be able to think long term. 82% of suspects are male. 79% of suspects are seeking money. 78% of victims are female. 60% of victims actually know their predator. So I think those are some pretty alarming statistics. And again, I don't want to scare all of you. The title of our presentation is, What's the Worst That Could Happen? And so in our closing slide, we really want you to stay safe. We're passionate about keeping your kids safe, but it takes the investment on your end as well. A while back, a mentor of mine, DJ Chef, actually taught me an acronym called LEAP, L-E-A-P. The L stands for learn. Learn the apps that your children are on. Download it. Check it out. You don't have to add people. You don't have to partake in it, but learn about these apps. And in 6 months, learn about it again because there was an update. Things have changed. So learn about the apps. LEAP, L-E. Okay, E stands for engage. Engage in conversations. Put your phones down. Next time you're at the grocery checkout aisle, you're going to reach for that phone. Don't do it. Talk to your children. Next time you're at the dinner table, put the phones down. Next time you're waiting a half hour at the doctor's office because things are just running slow, talk to your children. Engage in conversation. Figure out what's going on in their lives. Okay, L-E-A-O. A, I think, is the most important. This one is called Apply Model Behavior. Something pretty unique just happened to me a couple weeks ago. I was working security at the lacrosse game, and I'm assuming, I don't know much about lacrosse, but I'm assuming the ref made a mistake or a bad call. And I saw an adult stand up on the bleachers, start screaming so all of us could hear it. Whatever the referee's name is, you suck. And it was over and over. And I'm like, dude, we get it. You don't agree with the call. But he just kept yelling it. And then I think by now all the parents are like, okay, we get it. Our brains are developed. We can tell the difference between a sports game and a classroom. But what are the kids on the field learning when they see a trusted role model appear yelling at the ref, they suck because the ref made a mistake? Well, now your kids are seeing that, oh, my teacher just made a mistake in the classroom. I'm going to cause a disturbance. My parents do it, why can't I? Applying that modeled behavior is so, so important. You have the ability to distinguish a soccer game or a lacrosse game or a football game or a basketball game from a classroom. Not all of our kids do. And finally, LEAP, the P stands for promote the positive behaviors. When things go well, when your children do the right thing, that needs acknowledged. If we're only acknowledging the negatives, man, my parents are really hounding on me all the time. They don't even appreciate anything I do good. But if you can start promoting it when they do positive things, you're going to reward that behavior, and then all of a sudden they're going to continue to do the right thing because they're feeling that love from you, somebody who they trust and love. I promise you, Greg and Greg, we are passionate about your more children's safety. I love my career, the fact that I get to work in the schools all day, every day, and be a part of your children's lives. What we ask in return is that you invest in your children so that way they can have a successful future. That is our end goal. We don't want any more stories like the one you're about to see. We're closing with a video, and this video is a true story, and every time I watch it and I listen to it, oh man, I'm getting goosebumps already. It's heartbreaking. So let's invest into our children today so that way they can have a successful future. Thank you.
I didn't think that I had anyone to talk to about what was going on in my life, all the bad things, all the feelings I had for myself, just normal teenage feeling. So I just met someone online that I didn't know, and he said that basically the grass was greener on his side. I first met him on one of the private chat rooms where you just talk to like so many people, and then I would make my own, and we talk from there. And that progressed for about a month. Well, I knew from the start that he was how old he was. I didn't even think that we'd have a relationship. He was like a stranger. You could tell stranger things that you're never going to meet, stuff that you couldn't tell your friend. He was saying you're not worthless. You can come over here, I'll take care of you until you can, basically take care of yourself, and you won't have to deal with that anymore. And I just thought that was so much better than staying where I was. The second time I ran away, I didn't want to, but I knew if I didn't, there might be like a little more trouble, because he came to my house, and I get this call from someone else that he talked to online, and she said that he was outside waiting for me. Told my mom I was going to go out for a walk for a little while, and then I took off. I would rather went to my friend, which would have accepted, because I didn't know at the time that most of them were going through the same thing I was. I was gone for, it was about 2 days, and then they caught us at another bus terminal. They finally charged him with taking a minor over state lines, and he's right now sitting in prison. It was scary because he called me, because then he knew where I lived. He knew what my phone number was, so when he gets out of prison, he could just call me right back again and start this all over again. Well, he said he'd done it before, but he never got caught. So the only thing that's in my mind is, where are they at? Where were the past people that he's met before? If you say that it's not going to happen to you and you keep progressing more and more, then it's eventually going to happen to you whether you want it to or not, because you never know who that person is or what that person is capable of, because he could one day just show up, or he or she show up at your doorstep just waiting for you. When you're getting over your head, you're thinking, oh no, my parents will know what I'm doing. I can't tell them. They'll get mad, I'll get in trouble. Well, don't think of it like that. Think of it as if you keep talking to this person over the internet, you don't know what they're capable of. Yeah, there has been different scenarios played in my mind of what happened and what could have happened, and the one that did happen, I was lucky that I'm not dead on the side of the road right now, 6 feet under. That's how I feel about it. I can't believe I did this. Why did I do that for? All these things. It was like a fairy tale that never happened. It's very scary.
And let's thank both of the Gregs, please, for your information. A little taken aback by that video, so we can just moment here, having children. So, but tonight I'm pleased to introduce our keynote speaker this evening is Dr. Abigail Dempsey. Dr. Dempsey is a licensed clinical psychologist and assistant professor of psychology at Purdue University Northwest. Boiler up. Her primary research interests revolve around understanding the risks and leveraging the benefits of technology use. Her current research works to understand the effects of social media use on mental health and who is most at risk of experiencing negative effects. Additionally, Dr. Dempsey is developing novel digital interventions to provide mental health treatment to underserved communities. She regularly speaks at Indiana Youth Institute events and at public schools across the state. Dr. Dempsey, thank you for being here tonight.
All right. Thank you for having me. Can you hear me okay? All right. Let's see if this works. Awesome. So again, thank you for having me. Hopefully we haven't bummed you out too much, and I can inspire a little bit of hope at the end of our event here tonight. As I'm talking about social media use and mental health, there are a few things that I encourage you to keep in mind. One of those things is that this is a very young area of research. There's a lot that we still don't know. We're working on it, but the science moves a lot slower compared to how technology advances and changes over time. What we do know is that there are both positives and negatives to social media use. And what we often find in the research is actually that both too much and too little social media use become a problem when it comes to mental health. Excuse me, I should have grabbed a drink of water. So we know that both too much and too little, thank you. Give me one moment, please. Excuse me, thank you. So both too much and too little can cause problems for teen mental health. We also know that there are some people who are more at risk of experiencing some of the negative effects of negative effects of social media, including those who already are struggling with their mental health, young girls, and younger adolescents overall. A lot of that has to do with brain development. So the earlier on in brain development, the higher risk of negative effects we're noticing. We also know that even though there is a relationship between social media use and mental health, we know that that relationship really isn't as concerning as we might like to think it is based on just what we're seeing in our communities and what we're seeing on the news. So there are two big questions that we ask ourselves in the research. One is, are these two things related to each other in the first place? We have enough research to say definitively, yes, mental health and social media are connected. The second question we ask ourselves then is, how much does one influence the other? And that influence is where we start to see that it's actually pretty small. The effect size is pretty small, which is great news for us. It means we don't have to panic, but we should still be concerned and do our best to promote the benefits of social media and minimize the risks of social media. So some of the benefits of social media are, as you can probably guess, it's fun, which we've heard already today. It's also an avenue for adolescents to explore their identity and be creative and connect with others and seek out information that they might not have access to. This is a really important period of development for people where they're trying to figure out, who am I? What do I stand for? What's my place in this world? All of these are big questions, and there's a lot that we can do to support that offline, but we see that they're exploring these topics online as well. And if they're able to actually connect with positive communities online, supportive communities online, find information that is helpful to them,
they actually experience great mental health outcomes. We see a decrease in anxiety, we see a decrease in depression if social media is used in this way. We also know that social media can be a really great avenue for people to first start seeking help for mental health difficulties. By talking to people online and exploring things online, teens are better able to gauge whether what they're experiencing is normal. Is this something that everyone my age goes through? Or is this something that I might need a little bit more support around? And if so, how do I even go about getting that? That might be through connecting with online resources, other social media channels where they're getting a little bit more information about their struggles, where they're maybe getting coached how to go about asking trusted adults for support in this area. Maybe it's just figuring out the language. How do I talk about this in the first place? What do I call this thing that I'm experiencing? All of those can be really powerful for developing minds. And this can be especially powerful for people who don't otherwise have access to these resources. So people who are living in more rural communities, who feel less connected to the people around them in their community, people who have marginalized identities. Going online in these social media spheres can really be a protective factor for them. On the flip side, we do have risks that can be associated with social media use as well. So just as social media use can be a really powerful tool for improving connection, improving knowledge, improving self-discovery, it can also be a tool to damage those same things. We know from the research that even just being exposed to, whether or not they're actively seeking it out, engaging with it, commenting, sharing, what have you, just being exposed to some content puts teens at risk for negative mental health consequences. So seeing things like depictions of self-injurious behaviors, depictions of substance use, puts teens at risk for engaging in those behaviors in the future, even if they're not doing it now. As you can guess, engaging in these behaviors doesn't have a very positive effect on mental health. And that's kind of the trend that we see when it comes to the negative impact on mental health, is that it's not the social media itself that's the problem, it's what they're seeing and how they're using it. It's a tool, it's an avenue for these issues to develop. We've talked quite a bit tonight about predatory behaviors. Similarly, we could talk about cyberbullying for its own event, where teens are going online and becoming victims of really hurtful, really dangerous behaviors. And again, these are things that lead to shame and social isolation, maybe some anxiety and depression. We also have this kind of interesting issue here in the middle. And I think social comparison is where we really start to see this duality of social media. There are two different ways that we can engage in social comparison. One is called upward social comparison, and one is called downward social comparison. If I'm participating in downward social comparison, what I'm doing is comparing myself to people who I believe to be at the same level as me, or in some way at a lower level than me. I have more, I am more, I'm better than the people that I'm comparing myself to. In those cases, we see better outcomes. People tend to feel better about themselves in those situations. On the other hand, if I'm consistently comparing myself to people who I believe to be on a higher level than me, they have more than me, they are more than me, they are better than me, I'm going to feel worse about myself. And when I start to feel worse about myself, I start to have worse mental health symptoms overall. There we go. The other big piece piece of the puzzle when we're talking about the negative impacts or the risks of social media use on mental health is this idea of problematic or excessive use. Oftentimes, in just our regular day, we hear this as social media addiction. The good news is, even though we do have some elements of this that read like an addiction, we really don't have enough support in the research as it is now to say that it really is an addiction. So instead, we'll talk about it as being problematic or excessive. What that means for us is that there's no magic number for when this becomes a problem. Someone could spend an hour online a day or 12 hours online a day, and it's still not necessarily considered problematic. It's not necessarily considered excessive. When we talk about this, what we're talking about is impairment in other aspects of our life. Am I using social media to the point where I'm neglecting my offline relationships? Am I using it to the point where it's interfering with my schoolwork? Maybe I'm not paying attention in class because I'm checking my phone and my social media notifications, or I'm not doing my homework, or I'm late to practices. Whatever it might be, whatever domain you're looking at, is there some sort of impairment because of social media use? If there is, that's when we consider it to be problematic or excessive. Remembering that not all social media use is bad, and just because someone's spending a lot of time online doesn't necessarily mean that they're being exposed to or engaging in behaviors that are actively harming their mental health. If someone does get to the point where they're engaging in problematic or excessive social media use, we do tend to see that that level of use, where it's impacting other areas of their life, is associated with some other consequences that, again, then have a negative impact on mental health. It's not a direct pathway. There's usually a few things that happen between logging into social media or opening social media and having poor mental health. One of the things that we see is this kind of addiction-like quality that I mentioned, which is mostly related to things like, it takes me a little bit longer to feel satisfied that I've had my need met. Maybe I'm trying to relieve boredom or anxiety. I'm on social media a little bit longer over time to feel the same kind of effect. So we get that kind of tolerance process happening. We also tend to see the withdrawal type effects happening in social media use, that if you just completely cut people off from social media, you say you can't use it anymore, I'm taking it away from you, we see some anxiety and agitation coming up. Again, it's not the same kind of physiological symptoms that we would see in a traditional addiction, but that it exists at all kind of gives us insight into what these processes are for people. Through some of these same mechanisms, we tend to see that because this is a developing brain, and we know that it's impacting so many different areas of teens' lives, we also see that the reward centers in our brain and the emotion regulation centers in our brain are impacted by social media use. This is especially true for younger minds. As we get a little bit older and we develop through all these other ways, our brain starts to be a little bit more set, we see that the risk is not as great. But when we're first developing, when we're really trying to figure out how do I manage big emotions, how do I respond to things that feel good to me, that's where this is really critical. We also see, again, because of the same types of systems that are happening in our mind, that we start to develop sleep difficulties, we start to develop attention difficulties. In many cases, especially for those who started using social media at a younger age, we notice that they're developing symptoms that are very similar to ADHD, even in people who don't actually have a diagnosis of ADHD or meet the diagnostic criteria for ADHD. It's that powerful. The good news about all of this, though, is that these are all things that we can do something about. If there's 2 words that you remember from my entire talk tonight, it should be intentional and mindful. Social media is both good and bad. And what's most important for us is to do our best to minimize the bad parts, minimize the risk, protect against those as much as we can, and maximize the benefits that we get from that. And how we do that is by having conversations, for one, making sure that we're getting things out in the open. How are you using social media? What do you feel? How do you feel when you're using it? What kinds of things are happening? A lot of the same things that we talked about earlier with online safety apply when it comes to mental health as well, because it is those things that are impacting mental health, that are leading to feelings of isolation and shame and depression and anxiety, all of these things that we see really driving a lot of the mental health crisis that we have today. Also making sure that we're modeling the same healthy relationships that we're trying to expect from our teens, that we're trying to empower our teens to have. Our words only go so far. We have to actually back it up with our actions, and we have to be consistent with that as well. We also want to make sure that if we are seeing harmful things online, whether that's hate-based content, cyberbullying, predatory behaviors, that we're reporting it, and that we're talking about the impact that that's having on our teens and on their mental health. The last thing I want to talk about here is developing a family media plan. So this is a hyperlink. You will have access to this later on. It's completely free to use. I don't get any money for you using it. It's just a tool that I find to be really helpful for starting conversations about what technology should look like, can look like, rules and boundaries that we want to set as a family around social media use. There are 8 different domains that are aligned with the research that we have that has been kind of outlined here for you today. And there are many different ways to customize it. So I really encourage you to take a look at that resource when you do have the time and figure out what's going to be helpful for you. I do know that this can feel very overwhelming. There's a lot of different things that we can do or feel like we should be doing to help support teens in the area of social media use, to help protect their physical and mental well-being. My advice is to start where you're at. Figure out what is the current situation for me and my family, and what's just one change that we can make together to improve our relationships with social media and make sure that we're really getting benefit out of this and not being harmed by it. And all of that, all of these suggestions, all of what I just said, all of it boils down to make sure you're using social media intentionally with the mindset that I'm going to get good things out of this, and be mindful of when it starts to be harmful and coming up with plans on how to mitigate those risks. All right. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you again, Dr. Dempsey, so much for being here. Can we give her another round of applause? And I also want to make sure that we thank Detective Loveall and Officer Zimmerman for sharing their expertise. And of course, to the Carmel Clay Education Foundation for making tonight possible. Thank you so much for being here. We appreciate you taking time out of your evening. We want to continue this conversation. We know that we need to work together to help keep our students safe. I think there is another slide that may have a QR code asking for some feedback. We would love to know what more you want to know. So if you have a chance to give that a scan and answer a few brief questions, we do have some Carmel Clay Schools employees who will be here for a few more minutes. If you want to take some time and process through some of the things you've heard today, we'll have some guiding questions on the screen here in a little bit. We'd love for you to take a strategy that we use in the classroom called Turn and Talk. It's a great way to process after learning new information. So if you want to turn and talk to someone who is sitting near you, to someone that you came with,
and work through some of the ideas that you've heard today, maybe come up with a next step for you and your family. We encourage you to do that, and we'll conclude by shutting down the auditorium at about 8 p.m. So again, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate your partnership with us in this work. Have a great night.